Welcome to our 2023 New York Journalism Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which was supposed to be the 2022 Hall of Fame induction ceremony, but COVID got in the way and we had to reschedule. But we're glad you're all here and we're glad we could reschedule. My name is Peter Seke. I am the president of the Deadline Club, which is the New York City chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. For most of my working life, I was a correspondent with Reuters here and in Washington, and for 10 years I took time out to be the president and secretary-treasurer of the News Guild of New York. I think it could be said that this may be the most extraordinary collection of journalistic talent that ever gathered together in one drinking establishment, with a possible exception of when Haywood Broun drank alone. I figured one or two people might know who Haywood was. Haywood, who was known to enjoy his spirits, was a columnist, a regular at the Algonquin Round Table, and the first national president of what was then called the Newspaper Guild. He was also among the first of the 50 luminaries of the news business to enter the Hall of Fame when we launched it, or when the Deadline Club launched it back in 1975. Since then, the Hall of Fame has grown to 112, and today we'll add 6 more. I just have a few words to say about the Deadline Club, and then I'll let you all dig into your salads. I know some of you are already into your salads. We have been around for 100 years. The Deadline Club is here to advocate for the rights of journalists, to create a community for journalists, to help aspiring journalists, and to acknowledge exceptional journalism. Our events include informative panel discussions, workshops and mixers, including one next Tuesday where we'll be joined by a group of visiting Polish journalists, and you're all invited to that. We're currently, well, you have to check out our website. It'll be at Connally's on Tuesday night. We're currently accepting applications for scholarships, and we'll soon announce the finalists of our Journalism Awards contests. The winners of the contest will be announced at our annual awards dinner at the Harvard Club on May 18th, and we do hope to all see you there. There are many benefits to being a Deadline Club member, especially when you consider that membership is free if you're already an SBJ member. We hope you'll join us, or at least get on our mailing list. You can learn more about the Deadline Club at our website, which is deadlineclub.org, or just look at the back of your programs. When we come back, we'll begin our program, and some of the former Deadline Club presidents and current board members will be here to introduce our honored guests. So, we've got a great show for you. Please stick around. Thanks. And thank you for your patience. One of the many predecessors I have as president of the Deadline Club is Betsy Ashton. Betsy is a longtime correspondent at CBS News. She has left that and she's now a portrait artist extraordinaire. She's got a show that's running right now. And if you've ever attended any of our awards dinners, you'll know that Betsy is the one who knows who all the winners are. So folks, here to introduce our first honoree is Betsy Ashton.
That's high up there. How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everybody can hear me, right? Okay. It's a pleasure to be here with you, to see some faces of people I used to work with. We're just wonderful at CBS. Anyway, this is a special occasion. And before I bring our first honoree up here, I want to tell you that things happen at this event, and sometimes they're newsworthy. Let's go back. The case in point that I'll never forget was in 1995, and 2 of our honorees that year, the television version honorees, were Barbara Walters and Mike Wallace. Now, yes, it was very interesting because at this stage of the program, when we were ready to get started, where was Mike? Mike had not come into the room, and Barbara was going nuts. Where's Mike? Where's Mike? Where's Mike? I said, I don't know where he is. He told me he was coming. Everybody around him told me he was coming, assured me he was coming, and there's his wife Mary sitting over there at that table. She says he's coming. I don't know what's going on. But we're going to have to get started soon, and I said, you know, we'll do what we have to do. I was thinking, it was a heart attack time for me. But Mike, moments after that, storms in the door, followed by, of course, his executive producer at the time of 60 Minutes, storming in. They didn't need a door. They would have come right through the wall. And a look on their face, it was just like this. And Mike comes over to me and says, Betsy, can I go first? I said, anything you want, Mike? Absolutely. I said, what happened? What's going on? He says, you're going to find out. I said, okay. So I introduced Mike with the proper things about what he had done at 60 Minutes. And you have to remember, in those days, 60 Minutes had propped up CBS Incorporated. CBS had some really weak years on ratings, and shows weren't doing well, they were losing money, and it was 60 Minutes that was that solid block on Sunday night that was bringing in the money. That and the tradition at CBS that Bill Paley had said to the news division was just make me proud. Just make me proud. Do the news, do it right, make me proud. They never touched those people up in administration, in sales, all of that. They never touched the news stories and who was going to produce what and what was going to get on the air. With that, Mike gets up and says, we just came from Black Rock headquarters. And he said, we were meeting with the lawyers. Uh-oh. And he said, this has never happened before, ever. But we have a story, it's a dynamite story, and it deals with trouble caused by one of the biggest, not just a corporation, but a group of corporations in the United States, the cigarette industry. And he said, we have a whistleblower, and our whistleblower, this was Brown and Williamson, the head of the research division, had confessed to them that he knew that not only had all of the heads of these companies lied when they testified to Congress that, oh no, there's no problem with nicotine, it's not addictive. They were telling the research guy, oh, it's more addictive. Pump it up, pump it up. They'll get to sell more. They had him on tape. They had everything that they needed, and they wanted to, that story was about to air. And the lawyers said, no, you can't do it. And you can't do it because we will be sued by the cigarette industry and they can take down CBS. That was a shock. That was a low point for CBS News and for kind of the direction that things might go in the industry. I will never forget it. Needless to say, it became news. And you all heard about it. Yeah, they ultimately did the story, but 3 months after the Wall Street Journal got to break the story first. Some of you here remember that. So that was a very sad moment for 60 Minutes and Don Hewitt and Mike Wallace. And nevertheless, we go on. We keep trying. We keep doing our best. And some of the people in this room have done their best phenomenally. And we're here to honor them today. And our first honoree is Gay Talese, who can make a rare claim in journalism. He changed the way we approach our craft, the way we view our stories, and the way we write them. You, Gay, is acclaimed as the most influential of the new journalism movement of the 1960s that sought to marry hard-nosed traditional reporting with the techniques and artistry of fiction writing. It's a form the New Jersey native began exploring as a reporter at the New York Times and took to a new level through a series of iconic magazine profiles, including Frank Sinatra Has a Cold. That was in 1966. Esquire praised it as the best story it has ever published. And here's the story behind it. Refused an interview by Sinatra, didn't stop Gay. Gay interviewed some 75 of the so-called little people around Sinatra to reveal more about Old Blue Eyes than Old Blue Eyes ever could himself. As Gay has said of that approach, all these little stories become big stories when you think big about little people. Yes. Focusing on what he's often called the overlooked, the ignored, the uncovered, and reporting with an almost manic attention to detail were the hallmarks of Gay's 14 books. They include The Kingdom and the Power, about the influence of the New York Times, Honor Thy Father, the inside story of a mafia family, Thy Neighbor's Wife, a participatory exploration of sexuality in America, and Unto the Sons, a memoir about his family's immigration from Italy. And he's not done. No way. Gay is still building his considerable legacy, working on his next book about love and marriage. It is my great honor, on behalf of the Deadline Club, to enshrine Gay Talese as a member of the New York Journalism Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much for this honor, and I hope I'm heard. I'm going to begin as a speaker, number one, and tell you how I got into journalism. It began at the University of Alabama, where I was a student of journalism. I'm from Ocean City, New Jersey, but my father was a tailor in Ocean City, and he made suits for a distinguished doctor in our town, who's from Birmingham. When I couldn't get into college because my grades were so bad, Dr. Caro, my father's customer, said, "Oh, well, I'll get Gay in Alabama." My father never heard of Alabama. I never heard of Alabama. I don't even know what part of country. But I had no choice. In 1949, I was sent to the University of Alabama. And what happened there, for my good fortune, I met a student from Mississippi named Jimmy Pinkston. When I was there, he said, "You want to be a journalist, Gay? When you graduate, I'm going to let you go to New York and look at my cousin. He's the manager of the New York Times. He'll give you a job." "And he's your cousin?" "Yes." "What's his name?" "Turner Callage. He's the manager of the New York Times. You just go to New York, tell him you're my friend, your cousin, you get a job." I graduated in '53 from the University of Alabama. First thing I did, got on a bus. When I stayed with my parents for a couple of days, got on a bus, went up to New York, and the New York Times building, 229 West 43rd Street in those days. My father dressed me very well, so I was a well-dressed kid, 21 years old. Walked in the New York Times building. The receptionist there said, "May I help you, young man?" "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Callage, the manager." "Oh, do you have an appointment?" "No, I do not have an appointment, but I know his cousin, Alabama." "Just a minute, young man." And he looked at me, and if I was, I looked elegant, I was, and I remain, as you know. So I waited for a while, and then a man came out and said, "I'm Mr. Callage's secretary, executive secretary, Herr Andre. how can I help you? I said, I just graduated from University of Alabama. And Jimmy Pinkston and Mr. Collins' cousin said to go over here, I'll get a job. Well, Mr. Collins is very busy. You have no appointment. Just a minute, young man. Then he came back, he went into the newsroom, and then Mr. Andre, the secretary, came out again and said, he'll come back, it was about 11 o'clock in the morning. He'll come back at 4 o'clock. Mr. Collins has a meeting with his editors at 4 o'clock. Come at 5:04, and I'll get you to say hello, but you must stay long. So I won't be long. Okay. 5:04, I'm back in the building. I'd never been to New York before. I wandered around Times Square for another 3 hours. I returned at 5:04, and Mr. Andre said, come in, and he took me to the city room. Those days, vast, a whole block long, row upon row of people smoking cigarettes, typing typewriters, the bell ringing on typewriters. It was the most extraordinary sight of journalism, visually. Finally, I was escorted through the city room into a large office, Mr. Collins's office. He was a robust Mississippi guy with a very red face, and a black pinstripe suit and polished shoes. He had one shoe up at the desk. And there's a big office, and I walked in little by little. Mr. Collins looked at me. Sit down, young man. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Andre was right behind me, standing up as I sat down. What brings you to New York? I said, well, I came here, I'd like to be a journalist. I always wanted to be a journalist, Mr. Collins. I'd like to work for the New York Times. Oh, but you only have college education. Our people have a lot of experience. You work for other newspapers, come back. I said, but I know your cousin. You know my cousin? Yes. What may I ask, what was his name? And Jimmy Pinkston from Mississippi. Miss College was from Mississippi, obviously. And on the College's face was totally blank. Jimmy Pinkston. My cousin? I'm sorry, Mr. College, I was told he was your cousin. And there was silence, and I was embarrassed, and College was embarrassed too, I think. And there was a silence, and I said, and then people walking in the room, it's a 4 o'clock meeting. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. College. That's all right, he said. And they looked at his secretary and said, do we have any office boy jobs here for maybe? Because he looked, I think he was impressed that I looked, not that I knew who his cousin was. And he said, take his, Mr. Andre, take his name and phone number. If something comes up, I'll look. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you. I left, humiliated. What a bad impression. What a terrible cousin that guy in Mississippi was. 2 weeks later, in my father's tailor shop, phone call. Mr. Andre, you were here a couple weeks ago looking for an office boy job, copy boy job. Yes, sir. When can you come in? I can come in tomorrow. I get on the bus. No, next week. Next week when I got a job as a copy boy. That began my career. And what I take from that message is you show up. You don't use a phone. There was no Zooming in those days, no Googling in those days. You just show up, make appearance, and you might strike a chord of acceptability or some kind of encouragement to go back, but show up. And that's been my career throughout my life. Show up, be there in person. When I was later on a reporter, there was a great reporter named Harrison Salisbury, great Pulitzer Prize, and another one named Peter Keyes. And they both said, don't use the phone, just show up. I'm showing up today, and I'm very happy. Thank you so much.
It is fitting that Robert Caro is being enshrined into the Deadline Club's New York Journalism Hall of Fame. Long before he was known as the greatest political biographer of our time, before the 2 Pulitzer Prizes, the 2 National Book Awards, and before he was given the National Humanities Medal from President Barack Obama, Robert Caro won one of his first awards in journalism from the Deadline Club. True. It was for a piece he wrote as a young investigative reporter at Newsday in 1964 called Anatomy of a $9 Burglary, about the many lives affected by one small criminal act. Caro tracked down the burglary victim, the jurors, the defense attorney who was fooled by his client, and the burglar's wife who had to go on welfare to raise their 2 daughters alone while her husband was sent off to prison. It was a story that would come to typify the Caro way. Look at every angle, talk to every source, seek out every document, and follow the advice of his first editor at Newsday to never assume anything and to turn every page. Carole's deep reporting approach and engaging narrative style were next focused on his first masterwork, The Power Broker, exploring how Robert Moses nearly single-handedly reshaped New York City. He continued to explore the contours of power with The Years of Lyndon Johnson, which has spanned 4 volumes so far, including The Path to Power, Means of Ascent, Master of the Senate, and The Passage of Power. Putting his mantra, time equals truth, to the test, it's a series that has so far taken more than 40 years and included stints in which he relocated to the Texas Hill Country for a few years to better understand the culture of his subject. Every aspiring journalist who wants to understand commitment to your craft should read Robert Caro's memoir of his life on the job, working, and watch the new documentary about his quest to complete his 5th LBJ volume, fittingly titled Turn Every Page. It is my great honor to introduce our latest member of the Deadline Club, New York Journalism Hall of Fame, New York City native, Robert Caro.
So since turn every page seems to be the phrase that's associated with me, but I'm never quite sure that most people understand what it really means. But this is a group today who would understand, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what it means to me, what it can mean. So it was first said to me, as it happens, I became an investigative reporter by accident. I became an investigative reporter by accident. I was the low man on the totem pole at Newsday, and Newsday then had a managing editor who was like a character out of the front page. He had actually worked in the 1920s at the Hearst papers in Chicago and then down halfway. And he had a prejudice against reporters from prestigious universities. No one from Princeton, as I was, had ever been hired before. And I was hired as sort of a joke on him when he was on vacation. And he didn't take it nicely. And he wouldn't talk to me. My desk, he had a glass enclosed desk in the corner. My desk was right outside. And so he passed me several times a day. And I would say something like, hello, Mr. Hathaway, or good morning, Mr. Hathaway. He'd never reply to me. Then one Newsday then didn't publish on Sunday. So the low man on the totem pole worked Saturday afternoon and Saturday night alone in the city room. We were all there, alone there in the city room. And Newsday then had a crusade going on about something that was happening at the Federal Aviation Agency. And the phone suddenly rings, and the guy on it from the FAA, he says, I admire what you people are doing, and I know what files you should really be looking at. And if you come on down to Idlewild, Kennedy Airport, it's in Idlewild Airport, that's a little bit of this way. I'll have the files ready for you and you can go through them. So I called my editor and he said to call our great investigative reporter, Bob Green. But the thing was, this was the day of Newsday's picking. And everybody was on the beach at Fire Island. And this, of course, was a era of cell phones. So I called her, I kept calling around and couldn't get anyone on the phone. And finally someone said to me, you'll have to go down and do it yourself. So I drove down there and was shown into by this guy, was waiting for me at the door, I remember. And he had all the files, piles of files, laid out on a long table. And he left me alone. And I started going through them. It was the first time in my life that I had ever gone through files. And it was sort of a magical moment that I've never forgotten, because it happens. I love to go through files, but I didn't know that before then. And without thinking about it, I worked all night. I came back, I wrote a long memo, and I went home. At that time, I had been at Newsday less than 6 months. At that time, the newspaper guild contract said that you could be fired within the first 6 months without cause. And I, given the way Alan would talk to me, I thought I was a candidate for that. And I told I'm reliving in New Jersey, so we didn't move. And early on Monday morning, the phone rings and it's Alan's it's Alan's secretary, Julie Blum. And she says, Alan wants to see you immediately. And I said, well, I'm in New Jersey. And she said, Alan wants to see you immediately. So I said to Ina, see, I told you we were right not to move. I'm about to be fired. And I was sure all the way driving in there that I was going to be fired. And I get there at Caro, and June walk into the city room, and June Blum motions, go in there. And as I'm walking across the city room toward Alan, I see his head. He had a huge, big head, sort of with a bald, exactly like a monk's tonsure around the back. And it was always red, because Alan did a lot of drinking. And I see this huge red head bent over something that he's reading in his office. So I get to his office and I'm standing there and he doesn't look up at me. And after a few minutes I say, Mr. Allen or something, and he motions me without saying anything to sit down in a chair. And he keeps reading and I see that what he is reading is my memo. And after a long time, he looks up at me and he says, I didn't know anyone from Princeton could go through files like this. From now on, you do investigative reporting. And I said, in moments like this, I have great savoir faire. I said, but I don't know anything about investigating. And that's when he said to me, just remember one thing. Turn every page. Never assume everything. Turn every goddamn page. What are the implications of that for people in journalism, people here today? What exactly are the implications to that, at least in my mind? Turn every page means you can always find one more fact. You never know. You can always find another fact. What's the importance of that? We're all journalists and historians trying to do the same thing, basically, which is to find out the truth. Now, there is no truth with a capital T. There's no simple truth. There's no one truth. But the more facts you accumulate, the closer you can come to whatever truth that there is. That's what turn every page means. Seems to me all my life I've been coming across, I've been saying, looking at files in the Johnson Library and saying, you know, you never know what's in the next folder. You have to look at that. The older I get, the more I find out how true that is. That the important thing is to turn every page. And I'm happy to share that with you all this afternoon. Thanks.
Wow, that was kind of awesome. Good afternoon, my name is James Martinez. I'm on the Deadline Club Governing Board, and I'm an editor at the Associated Press. It's my great honor to introduce Edith Lederer. Because in my career at the Associated Press, and in everybody's career at the Associated Press, there has been one constant. Whenever Edie's name is mentioned, there are a handful of things that everybody says about her. That she is one of the best, if not the best reporter we have at the AP. That she's seen it all and done it all. That she knows everybody. And that she is an undeniable, high-energy force of nature. Edie is the epitome of what I think of when I think of a globe-trotting foreign correspondent. In her more than 56 years with the AP, she's shattered barriers for women and been an uncanny witness to history. She's covered wars, famines, nuclear standoffs, political upheavals. She's had bylines from every continent except Antarctica. To which I say, can we please find her a story to cover in Antarctica? Edie is a Long Island native who started at the AP here in New York in 1966, reporting on the student riots at Columbia University and Bobby Kennedy's Senate campaign. Her next stop was San Francisco, where a source gave her a tip in a manila envelope that she handed off to Jean Heller, the only woman on the AP's investigative team at the time. And Heller went on in 1972 to break one of the AP's biggest stories about the U.S. government's Tuskegee syphilis study. Wow. That same year, 1972, Edie became the first woman reporter assigned full-time from the AP to cover the Vietnam War. She went to Israel during the Yom Kippur War. She went to Peru to become the first woman to lead an AP foreign bureau. She covered China's move toward a Western-style economy. She reported from Afghanistan after the Soviet invasion, masquerading at one point as a rug buyer. She filed the bulletin announcing the start of the first Gulf War, trouncing the competition. She covered the breakup of the Soviet Union, conflicts in Bosnia, the terrorist bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, and the death of Princess Diana. And since 1998, Edie has been the AP's chief correspondent at the United Nations, covering the diplomatic side of conflicts and issues around the world. And hear this. To this day, she continues to out-report, out-write, and out-hustle the competition. This brings me to another first. It's my pleasure, on behalf of the Deadline Club, to announce the first AP print reporter ever in the New York Journalism Hall of Fame, Edith Lederer.
Thank you all so very much. I want to thank the Deadline Club for this incredible award, and I am especially honored to be the first Associated Press correspondent to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Receiving this award from the Society for Professional Journalists New York chapter is especially meaningful because my roots are in New York. My grandparents came to the United States to escape pogroms in Europe and settled in the Bronx, where my parents were born and raised. I was born at Beth Israel Hospital in Manhattan. When I look back at my life, I realize how fortunate I was to come of age at the dawn of the women's liberation movement. And when President John F. Kennedy told Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It was a challenge to my generation, which had just graduated from high school and were freshmen in college. I was at Cornell University, originally planning to go into the women's end of journalism, but I had been news editor of my high school paper, and I realized that what I really loved was covering breaking news. It's hard in 2022 to realize that in the mid-1960s, very, very few women were covering hard news. I knew I wouldn't have a chance of getting a job unless I went to graduate school. And even with a master's degree in communications from Stanford University, it was difficult. After months of rejection letters, a weekly Scripps Howard science newsletter hired me. More than a year later, I wanted to go to Europe, but I was told the only way I could was to quit. So I did. And I spent 3 months hitchhiking around Europe, which was a fantastic experience then, but I probably wouldn't do it today. When I returned, I took out my rejection letters that said I had no experience, and I tried again. I was a finalist for a job at the Washington Post that went to a man, but I got lucky. The Associated Press bureau chief in New York at the time, Doug Lovelace, hired me to fill in for 6 months on AP Local. It was a wire the AP ran just for the New York City metropolitan area, which at that time had over a dozen newspapers and dozens of radio and TV stations. That was March 1966, when you could count the number of women covering hard news for AP across the entire United States on less than 2 hands. My 6-month temporary job has lasted over 56 years. And I am thrilled at how far women have come at AP and in the American media. AP is now led by its first female president and CEO and its third female executive editor. In my early years at AP in New York and California, Every year, reporters would be asked their goals and ambitions. I wrote that I wanted to be a foreign correspondent. But that was a dream, because at AP, in order to be a foreign correspondent, you had to work on the foreign desk. And AP had a foreign editor who refused to have a woman on the foreign desk because he didn't think that women had what it took to cover wars, political upheavals, and disasters overseas. So you can imagine my shock when I got a phone call in the summer of 1972 from AP's president, Wes Gallagher, asking if I wanted to go to Vietnam to help cover the war. After a few days to tell my parents, I phoned Wes back and asked when would I be going to the foreign desk, assuming that the female ban had changed. He replied, "No, you're going right to Saigon." That was the start of my 25 years as a foreign correspondent. As James said, working everywhere except Antarctica, which one former AP president promised to send me to, but never carried out. I went from being the first woman assigned full-time to the AP staff reporting the Vietnam War to Israel at the start of the '73 Middle East War. I also covered the war in Afghanistan, the first Gulf War, the conflict in Northern Ireland, the end of the war in Bosnia, the civil war in Somalia, and the aftermath of the genocide in Rwanda. If you had a couple of hours, I have a lot of good stories. I had peacetime assignments too. I was AP's first female bureau chief overseas, based in Lima, Peru, and I helped cover the downfall of communism and the breakup of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s and the Romanian Revolution. While based in London from 1982 until 1998, I also wrote about military and international security issues and global problems ranging from population growth and the fight for gender equality to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, the fight against terrorism, and the early campaign to save the environment. This was all very good background for my job since 1998 as AP's chief correspondent at the United Nations. It's been fascinating reporting on the diplomatic side of conflicts, crises, and global problems. And it's frustrating that so many are unresolved, from the current war in Ukraine to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and conflicts in Syria, Yemen, Congo, and Sudan, to name just a few. Then there are the ongoing global issues, from the escalating nuclear programs in Iran and North Korea to our heating planet and growing global poverty. When I look to the future, I look back to the high hopes when the world's nations adopted a 150-page platform for action to achieve equality for women at the last UN Women's Conference in Beijing in 1995, where I was AP's lead reporter. And I see the backsliding today, starting with the Taliban, not only banning girls any education beyond 6th grade and from working, but from entering parks and gyms. But also the protests in Iran for equal rights led by young women that the government has used force and arrests to squash. And I ask myself, what will it take to achieve gender equality, which is a United Nations goal for 2030? It certainly won't happen by then, and unfortunately, I doubt it will happen in any of our lifetimes. I also worry that celebrity journalism dominates today's media and that the space for international news has shrunk. How are young Americans going to compete in this new interconnected world if their knowledge of international affairs is superficial? Bravo! And what does that mean for America's future global leadership? And looking to the future, we now are living in a world where something called a chatbot, powered by artificial intelligence, can write papers, take exams for college students, disseminate false material, and even express love for a live person. My questions are, have the benefits and liabilities of artificial intelligence ever been seriously debated? And what is going to happen to critical thinking of students and older human beings? Are we heading to the world of 1984? Before I close, I would like to thank the Associated Press for giving me so many opportunities to live my dream. I have had a privileged seat in that front row of history, but that history has too often been grim. I have watched people collapse and die of starvation in Ethiopia and Somalia, and I have seen the butchery of the Rwanda genocide. I have visited camps for people fleeing conflict where children have begged me for food. And I have written about the growing disparities in a world where over 850 million people go to bed hungry every night, while more than 1.5 billion people are overweight or obese. And a tiny percentage enjoy unimaginable billions of dollars in riches. When I look back at all the death, despair, and dissension I have seen in my life, I have often asked myself, what would make a difference? My best answer is just one word: tolerance. And I ask you, wouldn't it be wonderful if every single child in the world was required to be taught from a very young age to be tolerant of other people's race, religion, ethnicity, gender, and political beliefs? That's my dream for the future, because it would almost certainly lead to a more peaceful world. Thank you. And on that note, I congratulate my fellow inductees, and I thank the Deadline Club again for this truly wonderful honor.
Hi, I'm John Long, former Deadline Club president, alumnus of the Louisville Courier-Journal, the Wall Street Journal, and I teach journalism now at St. John's University. Ken Auletta. Our next recipient, Ken Auletta. What? Okay. This is why I'm in print. Okay.
Well done.
Okay, well, you probably didn't hear me the first time. Ken Auletta is our next recipient. He's the only one we're honoring today who got into this business as a campaign manager in the rough and tumble world of New York politics. And his inability to get Howard Samuels elected governor in 1974, Samuels' fourth failed attempt, by the way, turned out to be good for all of us. Because Ken is on a stellar career in journalism at such publications. It launched Ken on a stellar career in journalism at such publications as The Village Voice, New York Magazine, The Daily News, and finally, The New Yorker, and his status today as America's premier media critic. If there's one word that's associated with Ken, it's pressing. Through his New Yorker Annals of Communications columns and profiles, and his 13 deeply reported books, Auletta has often been the first word on every major shift in the communications landscape for decades. Auletta was among the first to popularize information superhighway in a 1993 profile of Mary Dillard. And just his book titles alone trace the story of a reporter on the cutting edge. 1991, Three Blind Mice, How the TV Networks Lost Their Way. 1997, The Highwaymen, Warriors of the Information Superhighway. 2001, World War 3.0, Microsoft and its enemies. 2009, Googled, the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah.
Ken was even among the first to chase the sexual predations of Harvey Weinstein, which he chronicles in his latest bestseller, Hollywood Ending, Harvey Weinstein and the Culture of Silence. For a lifetime of achievement that continues to this day, the Deadline Club is proud to induct Ken Auletta into the New York Journalism Hall of Fame.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding everyone of my failed career in politics. Actually, because of that failed career, I did become a journalist. And if you go back to 1974, when I was the campaign manager for Howard Samuels, we went from a 20-point lead in the polls, and with my help, he went to a 20-point defeat in the polls. But I learned that not only dumb things are done in politics, but dumb things are done in journalism. And in 1974, later that year, I happened to read, I was unemployed, and I happened to read Bob Caro's book on Robert Moses. And I didn't lift my head for 3 days reading that book. And I was so moved, so outraged by Moses, that several months later, I'm now employed by the Village Voice and New York Magazine. And I get a letter. I don't think I've ever told you this story, Bob. I get a letter from Robert Moses. And he said, Mr. Auletta, we've never met. I've been reading you. I've been writing about the fiscal crisis of New York and the terrible trepidation, the things that people like Mayor A. Beam and others have done. And he says, I'd love to have you come up for lunch at the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority. And I, so outraged by Bob, I blame Bob for this, I threw it in the wastebasket. And I was just this self-indulgent jerk. And I never went up to see Moses. And the truth is, our job as journalists is to listen. And I refused to listen to him. So I continued to work at The Voice and at New York Magazine. And in 1977, if you remember, Rupert Murdoch did a hostile takeover of both publications from Clay Felker. And a group of us went on strike saying we're going to stop it. And I went to see Howard Squadron, who was Murdoch's attorney, who I happened to know actually from politics. And I said, Howard, you understand, if Murdoch succeeds, we're all going to leave. 40-some of us are going to leave this employ. He said, are you finished, Ken? I said, yes. He said, let me tell you, you are furniture. You can be replaced. And so we all quit, and we were all replaced. So I go to lunch some weeks later. I'm unemployed. What am I going to do? And I come back to my apartment, and there's a message on the machine, and I press the red light. Hello, Mr. Auletta. This is William Shawn. S-H-A-W-N. I couldn't believe he spelled his name out. And I wound up starting in '77 to write for the New Yorker. And I also wound up getting a column in the Daily News with my picture in it on Sundays. And in Coney Island, where I'm from, the Daily News was really a big deal. The New Yorker, I don't know that my parents read it. But in any case, so I'm doing these stories, and I kept on thinking, my aim in life is, Gaetano, is to be able to write half or as quarter as good a narrative story as that son of a bitch right there. And, but that was a hope and a dream. Thank you for this award. It's been my pleasure, and it's my pleasure to be in the company of my 5 colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, clapping to fix the mic. That was nice of you, everyone. And I'm following Ken Auletta. I guess one of the great things is that I once got to edit him because we're on the artist-writers softball team together, and he wrote something for our little program. So that's my claim to fame of working with you. I'm Julie Walker. I am on the Deadline Club board, and I'm a correspondent at AP Radio. I contribute to 1010 Wins and to AP Print. And our next honoree is Carole Simpson. Woo! So her stellar career as a reporter and an anchor at ABC News is marked by a singular pioneering achievement. Beginning in 1988 and for the next 15 years, Carole broke barriers as anchor of the ABC World News Tonight weekend editions, the first Black woman to anchor any major network newscast. Her steady presence, her sharp professionalism and style, it was an inspiration to untold women, especially women of color, myself included, who were pursuing careers as broadcasters. Okay, I got my start in journalism as an intern at ABC News in Paris. And it's only fitting that another one of those women, someone who has followed in Carole's footsteps as anchor of World News Tonight on Sundays, Lindsay Davis, is here as part of the ABC News team to honor you, Carole. Carole began her media experience working at a newspaper during college summers. From the beginning, Carole was breaking barriers. She worked in radio in Chicago. She started in Chicago as the city's first Black woman television reporter. And then after establishing herself at ABC, came another milestone in 1992, when she became the first woman of color to moderate a presidential debate. That was between George H.W. Bush, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton, and we know how that turned out. And throughout the 90s, Carole continued to report on big stories, covering Nelson Mandela's release from prison, the Clarence Thomas Anita Hill hearings, and the Oklahoma City bombing. That's just a few of the big stories that Carole covered. Carole has made it her mission to help others succeed as she did. After retiring through her mentoring scholarships and as a professor at Emerson College. In fact, Carole has taught journalism classes at times throughout her entire career. So it's my great honor, on behalf of the Deadline Club, to enshrine into the New York Journalism Hall of Fame, Carole Simpson.
I told you the Barbara Walters story.
What happened to her?
I asked you if you wanted.
Oh, it was her hair that got messed up. Okay. Well, it's very nice.
Yeah, I got the right one.
And it's yellow and blue for Ukraine colors, right? Ukraine colors.
I'll tell you the story.
And I don't have anything in my wardrobe that will go with this. I might need some new clothes because I'm going to wear it and show it off. I'm so proud of it. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so honored to accept this induction into the Hall of Fame. It sounds so impressive, doesn't it? And I am honored to be in the company of my fellow honorees. I thought that the Deadline Society had made a mistake. I didn't belong in this group. But then I remember journalists never make mistakes, right? What to say in my remarks? Well, I could bemoan the assault on a free press, the threats to our democracy, the sexploitation of the news on local news. Have y'all seen some of the weather women's dresses? They are body conscious, really body conscious. What's that about? So we had the other honorees, and they told us things that white men might tell you, except for Lederer. But none of them know what it is like to be black and make your way through the broadcast industry. So I want to tell you about that. I had to rattle cages, fight, claw, beg, cajole, demand even, everything I got along my way in journalism. Nothing came easy. Everything was a battle. Why? Why did I have to fight like that? And, well, you know, everybody who is ambitious, they will tell you do that. White men do not have to do that. They don't. And you can believe me because I've been in the business for 50, 60 years. I lived it and I saw it. Black men are not as blessed, but they got further too. There was a Max Robinson and Brian Gumbel and an Ed Bradley. At the time, there were no women doing that. You don't think I wanted to be a 60 Minutes correspondent? Of course I did. But they wouldn't consider me as a black woman. White women have had to fight for things they've gotten in the business. But it's the black women that are at the bottom of the totem pole. Okay, the last ones to be considered. And we have the double whammy. Because we're black, and because we're female. And there are people that don't like us because of our color, and other people that don't like us and want us to succeed because of our sex. I am an expert on discrimination, okay? How many people do you know that have had triple discrimination? I was discriminated on my sex, on my race, and then age. How many people have gotten all of that? I have suffered. I have really suffered from this discrimination and the fight against it. Throughout my career, there was sex discrimination, being touched, having a man reach down my blouse and fondle my breast, men who reached under my skirt to make me go in the newsroom in front of everybody. How insulting and embarrassed do you think I felt? And these were all attempts to make me go away. Go away. But I was determined to be a journalist. That was my love, that was my life, and every no that I got, every no, you can't do this, no, you can't go there, no, you can't do this, I used as vitamin pills. And I took them like energy drinks to energize myself for the fight. Because I was going to show them, you can't tell me no. I'm going to go where I want to go, and I'll die trying. I really felt that strong about it because so many people said, you can't do it. You'll never do it. I was kissed in the newsroom. I was hit on by executives that were disgusting. I had to make it clear that I was not going to play that game. I would say it with a smile, but a very firm voice. And after a while, these men realized Carole wasn't going to play that game. I had a boss in Chicago tell me that I couldn't be an anchor because women didn't like to hear other women on the air. I'm going, where's that research? Who did that? Women weren't on the air. Women didn't hear other women on the air. How did you say that? Well, they prefer the male voice. It's not as shrill. And it isn't as authoritative as a male's voice. And I'm going, is my voice authoritative? And he goes, well, your voice is okay, but, you know, you can't be an anchor. I also had, anytime white people were told things like that, they weren't told things like that. No white people ever heard that. It was all to keep me, no, you can't do it. I was told that I couldn't be an anchor because my diction was too precise. I spoke too clearly for the audience. And I said, I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing, so people would understand everything we had to say. No, I sounded like a schoolmarm. And there was a black guy that I worked with who wanted to be an anchor, and he was told he spoke too ethnic. So if you speak badly, you can't be an anchor. If you speak goodly, you can't be an anchor. So it was all a way to deny us these opportunities. Any way to shut it down. When I became a weekend anchor, many of my ABC colleagues said I only got the job because I was a black woman. Oh, that was interesting. Now what was holding me back was giving me more opportunity than anyone else. And one of the correspondents said, Carole, if I put on blackface and wear a skirt and put a scarf on my head, can I be an anchor? What kind of racial bullshit is that? It's racial. No one apparently thought that I was just good, that I got the job because I was good at it. And ABC wouldn't have me do it for 15 years if I hadn't been good at it. I actually had the top-rated show on the weekends. Because what happened was, being the first woman to anchor on the weekends, and being a black person, cities like Seattle, where there was a large Asian population, Oklahoma City, where there was a large Native American population, Detroit, where there was a large black population. People turned to me because I was different, and they liked what they saw. So my ratings were tops. I went to a going away party. Sarah, would you mind getting me some water? I'm getting dry. Am I talking too long?
No, you're fine. You're fine. Keep going.
Keep going? Yes. James told me not to go long. I have no place to set it. Thank you, my friend Sarah from Boston. So I went to a going away party in the Washington Bureau of ABC News. Bob Zelnick was going to Moscow to do a tour of duty in our Moscow Bureau. I didn't really want to go to the party, but I decided I'd stop by. So I'm about to walk into the conference room where the party was going on and barely get across the threshold when one of the executives of ABC News said to me, "Where's your cap and apron? Aren't you going to serve?" He looked at me. I mean, there wasn't seconds. He took a glance at me, so what he sees is a black woman. I was already an anchor with some public acclaim and attention. He didn't see Carole Simpson. He saw a black woman who should be serving hors d'oeuvres at this party. I won't tell you how I dealt with him, but I dealt with him. And it's, there's so many stories like that. I could go on and tell you those kinds of slights, those kinds of insults. Oh, one more. At the New York desk, I helped organize the women at ABC News to get rid of sex discrimination. And so the black employees organized too, so I joined them. I was in both groups. And each group had a luncheon with Rune Arledge, so we could air our grievances. And so there were a couple of black correspondents that stopped at the national desk to say hi to everybody, because we don't get to see them. We came from Washington. And so a very high executive of ABC News, who is a woman, looked at us and said, "Oh, you all are here for the Rune lunch. What's on the menu? Fried chicken and watermelon?" You know, you get so tired of it. It's like, what is going on? How could you look at us, those of us that were respected journalists, on television, and talk to us like that? As I say, there's so many things, and I tell you, almost like clockwork, every 6 months that I worked, 24 years for ABC, I would get a letter, a call, an email, a comment that would make me know I was a black woman. That's all you are, is a black woman. Came from the public, came from colleagues, and you know, I get emotional talking about it as I relive some of these things because it hurt. It really hurt. And I was finally at the point, when am I just going to be Carole Simpson? That's all. Why do you see sex and color when you look at me? But it never ended. It never ended. And that began at my career in radio in Chicago and continued until I retired from ABC in 2003. When I took the job, I was appointed to the job by the Bipartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. But when I was named moderator of that 92 second presidential debate, it was difficult. There were 3 candidates. They were trying a town hall format. I was the first person to do that. And I prepared and prepared because people were calling me. Black people were calling me saying, "You gotta do good. Don't embarrass us. You gotta do well. Had the same thing from women. You're representing women, you gotta be good. And that pressure, I mean, I have put enough pressure on myself, but to have all this other pressure was tough. Anyhow, I did the debate, and the New York Times did an editorial the next day saying that I had done a good job. And I heard from all kinds of people outside saying I had done a good job. Did I hear anything from ABC executives saying I did a good job? Anything? A note? A call? No. And I heard later that there had been apprehension on the 5th floor, that Carole may not be able to handle this. Carole may not be able to handle this. Yet they put me on the air, they knew what I'd work. Why would they think that of me? I don't think they would have thought that of Diane Sawyer, of Barbara Walters, or the other people at ABC that were women stars. They were white, okay? They weren't black. Age happens to everybody. I run headlong into age discrimination. Where did this come from? I've been doing my work going along. I was 63, still doing everything I did. I didn't look old. I didn't act old. I didn't feel old. But they thought I was old. Time to replace you. And not replace you, it wasn't done that way. It was like, give you something that you hated so much you couldn't stand to do it. That's the sneaky little way they do it. Offer you something that would be so embarrassing for you to take, you had to leave. When I was teaching college, the dean said, Carole, wouldn't you like to be in January out of Boston and in Florida? You could be sitting on a beach. You could be enjoying the sun. I said, hell no. I want to go to Florida. Why would I want to go to Florida? Did I fight it? Yeah, I did. I have continued to fight. And then I got tired of it. I got tired of fighting, and I retired finally when I was 78. But on my terms. And when I wanted to. You know, I spoke out and I paid a price for that. But when I hear young people tell me, hey, you were an inspiration, you really helped me. I have scholarships. I try to help all those behind me. I'm not one of those women, I've got mine, forget about you. I really felt an obligation to share everything I knew and the money that I have to bring along new minority and women journalists. So proud of Lindsay Davis, who has taken my seat on the weekend news and doing a fabulous job. I am so proud of her. Thank you. And how long am I serving? I'm almost finished. Okay, there's been progress. And boy, did I see it yesterday when I visited ABC headquarters and met for the first time Kid Godwin, who is the president of ABC News, a black woman. I couldn't believe a black woman would ever be named president of ABC News, and there she is. I was so excited. But I'm concerned about her. She's a black woman. They will try to find something down the line, may not be now, but I have that little confidence in our executives in doing the right thing for the right reasons. We have had many advances in the world like that. Voting rights, abortion rights, social justice, and what's happening? The radical right is attacking all these things. I worry about whether women will have to go back home and not work, whether minorities will lose the opportunities, equal opportunities they have gotten. And it makes me very sad, because I'd like to be happy to look at the future, but I'm not. I worry. But I'm not going to leave it on this downer. I'm going to finish with a joke. Hopefully, it'll make you laugh and forget about how down I am right now. It's about a blind man and his dog, his seeing eye dog. He's waiting at an intersection to cross the street. And have you heard this story? No. Okay. And there's a red light on the other side of the street. So he's waiting there, and a woman comes to stand and wait at the light too. And the dog starts taking him into the street, and the light is red. And he finally pulls the dog back and goes back to the curb because he can see that cars are coming down there. And so he waits a little bit longer. The dog again takes him into the street. They get halfway there. There are cars coming and blowing horns, and he finally struggles with his dog to the other side of the street. So the woman finally gets the green light, and she crosses the street just in time to see the blind man reaching in his pocket and giving the dog a dog biscuit. And she said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I just saw what your dog did. He almost got you killed. Why are you rewarding him?" And he said, "Lady, I know what I'm doing. I'm giving a biscuit so I can find out where his mouth is so I can kick his ass." So some of us need some ass kicking. Into the Deadline Society. You're up.
Thanks. My name is Colin DeVries. I'm immediate past president of the Deadline Club. And it is my honor to introduce our final honoree of the day, Anthony Mason. When his colleagues at CBS News nominated him for this honor, the words they used were, "He's a legend. He has done it all." In his more than 35 years with CBS, Anthony has 41 years. All right. 41, thank you. Thank you for the edit. Anthony has forged an award-winning career that has made him one of the most versatile and accomplished journalists on television. He's gone from foreign reporting to business reporting, to culture reporting, to anchoring some of the network's flagship broadcasts. And he's infused it all with a trademark voice and style that conveys calm, intelligence, and credibility. Anthony is a New York City native who worked his way up local television in Tulsa, Philadelphia, and WCBS in New York, before landing at the network in 1986. As a foreign correspondent in London and then Moscow, he would go on to report on major news from more than 40 countries, including the Iran-Iraq War, the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Scotland, and the rise of Boris Yeltsin and the demise of the Soviet Union, coverage which won him one of his 11 career Emmy Awards. He smoothly transitioned to the anchor desk with frequent appearances as host of CBS Evening News, CBS This Morning, and CBS Sunday Morning. Over the last several years, he has shown even more versatility, establishing himself as CBS's senior culture correspondent and one of the top music journalists anywhere. He's become known for his insightful interviews with the most prominent musicians of our time, including Elton John, Bruce Springsteen, Aretha Franklin, and Paul McCartney, as well as many more lesser known but equally interesting artists. It seems you haven't really made it unless you've been interviewed by Anthony Mason. On behalf of the Deadline Club, we're proud to induct Anthony Mason into the New York Journalism Hall of Fame.
Look at this posse. This is embarrassing. This is very shiny. Thank you to the Deadline Club. I'm an admirer of all the inductees here. Carole, Simpson, my seatmate, said to me, "You're the baby of the group." Carole, nobody says that to me anymore. That's the nicest thing I've heard in a long time. I'm a native New Yorker. My first semi-serious journalist job was when I was an editor at my college paper, the Georgetown Voice. And a colleague and I, fellow editor, were at an M Street bar one night, one inebriated night. And on the back of a cocktail napkin, in this conversation we were having, we decided to write down why the reason New York was a wonder and DC sucked. I still have that napkin, my opinion hasn't changed. I worked in a lot of political campaigns here in the city when I was a kid. I thought I wanted to go into politics. I would hand out leaflets at subway stops when I was 12 and 13, usually for Republicans when that word meant something else. But I would bark, "Meet Bill Diamond, your candidate for state assembly," and I would try to yell down into the subway tunnel so everybody coming up would hear us. And in retrospect, that was kind of the beginning of my broadcasting career. All the candidates I worked for, though, seemed to lose. I know how Auletta feels. One summer, I signed on to work for Mayor Bean, his re-election campaign. I didn't have particularly strong feelings about Mayor Bean. I don't think anybody really did. But they paid me $200, and I thought, he's the mayor, he can't lose, right? He lost. And I finally got the message. But to get my first real job in television, I had to go far, far away. Gay may not have known where Alabama was, but I knew where Tulsa, Oklahoma was, and I didn't really want to go. But that's the first job I got. And from the balcony of my tiny apartment on the outskirts of Tulsa, across this field, I could see this towering sculpture of praying hands at the Oral Roberts University City of Faith Medical Center. This was a foreign land. And I used to sit there every night and pray that someday I would get back to New York City. The call finally came in 1984 when I was hired by Channel 2. Jim Jensen, Ronald Smith, Michelle Marsh were the anchors. Lester Holt had the desk next to me. Ken Auletta was a contributor. Betsy Ashton was there. And the fabulous Tony Guida could usually be seen standing at the assignment desk, gesticulating with an unlit cigar and waving the assignment he's been given, going, "There's no story here." Tony was often right. But as you learn in local news, that doesn't matter. My biggest assignment at Channel 2 was covering the trial of General William Westmoreland, who sued CBS for libel. You can imagine how intimidating that was, covering that. It was a huge case, as you may remember, and of course every CBS executive was watching what was happening. And that's ultimately how I got hired by the network. I'm now in my 41st year at CBS, which means I've had a lot of chapters. And I just want to mention several people here today who were instrumental in writing those chapters. Back in 2005, I heard that I was the business correspondent. I heard Sunday Morning was working on landing a Bruce Springsteen interview, and I went to Ramon Parkins, who was a senior producer. Yeah. And I said, "Who do you guys have in mind to do that?" And he said, "How about you?" That was the first music story I ever did. And it literally changed my life. I've been covering business for quite a while. My co-conspirator on that beat was Guy Campanile, who's now an esteemed 60 Minutes producer. In 2007, as the economy was just starting to get really sketchy, I got really sick. It took 3 months to figure out that I had a bloodstream infection. But while I was literally fading away, I lost 25 pounds in 3 months. Guy, who just made me the best breaking news producer I've ever worked with, Guy literally held me up. And John LaPook, who's here, Dr. John LaPook, who's the chief medical correspondent at CBS, is the guy who got me to the doctor who finally fixed all that. My producers today, who I call the A-Team, Rebecca Castagna, Angelique Fisk. Last summer, we landed the biggest story I've had in a long time. We've been working on it for a year. Nobody was sure it was even going to happen. We got the tip that they were going to try to get Joni Mitchell back to perform at the Newport Folk Festival. We went up there, it was July, end of July, and they didn't even know if Joni was gonna sing. And we didn't even have an interview agreed to, but everybody said, come, it might happen. And we went, and on 5 minutes notice, they suddenly said, Joni will talk to you. And this story, by the way, nearly fell apart about 20 times. But my enduring image of those two is sitting on the floor of a Newport Airbnb, trying to bulk feed giant video files through a wonky Wi-Fi system at 2 in the morning with our entire big scoop hanging in the balance. As good producers do, they got it done. That's what, in television, you get a lot of attention in television, but it's the producers who literally determine on a daily basis whether you're gonna look good or not. And I'm grateful to all those folks. And Brian Applegate, who I worked with for 8 years at CBS Saturday Morning. We built that show from nothing. And he's now got one of the classiest shows on TV. I'm grateful to all those folks. I've had a fabulous career, which I'm incredibly grateful for. Thank you for this.
That's our show for today, folks. It was great having you. If the honorees wouldn't mind hanging out for just a minute or two for some photos, and then we're out of here. Thank you so much for coming. And also, May 18th, mark it on your calendars. That's our annual awards dinner at the Harvard Club, May 18th. See you then.